Let's quickly call to order the meeting of the Municipal Housing Agency Governing Board for February 25th. I'd ask the clerk take roll of the board, please.
Kelly.
Here.
Coleman.
Here.
Moore. Here. Reese. Here. DeHappy.
Here.
Hensley.
Here.
Meyer.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Item 2 is a hearing on the amended Municipal Housing Agency annual budget for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2013. Doug, any comments on this? We've got 2 hearing items here.
Good evening, Mayor, County, members of the Municipal Housing Governing Board, Doug ROMIG, Housing Services Director. The FY13, as previously presented in the budget presentations to this Governing Board, have been impacted by additional federal funding cuts from HUD. So we do have revisions of about another $92,000 in projected losses from the proration reductions in public housing and also the Section 8 administrative fees from 80% to 75% from what was originally budgeted a year ago. And I also would like to make mention to this body that the Housing Authority submitted a request to HUD to use some of our disposition funds to reach our baseline number of vouchers. This really would have impacted FY14, starting in FY14, FY15. To use that $1.6 million to issue another 308 vouchers, which meets the HUD regulation requirements. And we received a phone call late last week that that is going to be denied. We're waiting for the official notification to see how we can appeal that decision, because we don't believe that they're following the regulations as established by HUD on that request. But that does affect our operating budget, because that would have generated about $186,000 in new Section 8 administrative fees for the agency, plus would have allowed us to serve another 300 plus families in our community, where we would have fronted the money initially, and then through congressional approval, which is through what's called re-benchmarking, HUD would have picked up that money and paid those administrative fees moving forward.
Do we know why we were denied? What was the rationale?
The rationale was that it was an internal policy decision based on the Congress wanting to contain the funding for Section 8 throughout the nation.
But you don't have the written opinion yet?
Correct. We're still waiting for that.
So this is sort of a verbal comment that you got over the phone. In terms of the amended budget, are you saying that impact has been shown to us on the information you gave to us at the workshop?
No, it is not, because actually the impact would have impacted FY15. We would have fronted the money in 13 and 14, and then the re-benchmarking would have occurred in 14. So those numbers aren't in here, but I wanted to make you aware of it, because we would have started expending the disposition funds to issue those vouchers, but HUD would not have picked those up yet.
Okay, so we are having a hearing on this. Do you have some evidence in writing? I noticed in looking at the Housing Governing Board agenda item number 2 that doesn't present any amendments. Should we see these amendments, or are you just reporting that there are going to be some and we're going to vote on this later after you get them or see them or present them to us in some way?
They'd be presented when we do our revised budget for next year, because it won't impact this hearing on the current FY13, but it could impact FY14 if we don't, through a recourse of appealing that denial. We might have to adjust the 14 budget depending on what decision HUD makes ultimately.
Okay, so are you asking us to vote on the, after this hearing, on this budget, on the amendment? And if so, we haven't seen the amendment.
The budget, the amended budget that's been submitted through finance takes into cost the changes that we anticipated with the reduction of proration.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Board? If somebody's clear on what it is that we would be voting on, would they move?
I'll move it.
What are you moving?
Moving, is it 2 and 3?
No, just two.
Just 2.
2.
What amendment are you moving?
They're amending the Municipal Housing Agency annual budget for June 30, 2013. It'll be the same thing that we're doing on our budget for the city. It's the amended budget that we're required by to submit an amended budget. Correct.
Okay.
Five yes, 2 no.
All right, takes us to item 3, hearing on the proposed Municipal Housing Agency annual budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2014. Doug?
Again, this is the projected budget for FY14 with the information we have to date within the housing agency. Sequestration will have an impact on this budget, but we will not know the terms of that until that action occurs, and then depending on whether a continuing resolution or a federal budget is approved, we would have to adjust and amend based on the decision of Congress to fund the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. I will inform the governing board, I did send a letter this morning to HUD's Special Application Center asking that we be authorized to use our disposition proceeds to fund housing assistant rental payment contracts for any existing families should we see a negative impact from sequestration. HUD is projecting a 6% loss. If that carries over a 12-month period, we would lose $1 million of rental subsidy, and that would impact 200 families that are currently receiving assistance. So my request was to spend up to $1 million to carry those families until we receive our final budget and we can right-size the organization through attrition.
Do we have a copy of that letter and your statement?
No, that just went out today, but I can have that forwarded on. I did send it to the city manager's office this morning when I sent it out.
Okay. We probably need to see those things moving forward. This is the board that gets called out for overseeing these kinds of things. So we need to probably see that. But what you're saying is this is going to be affected by the sequestration potentially. Is it also further affected by the reduction in that additional 5%, or is that only Section 8 vouchers?
That's the Section 8 administration. And
does that impact this budget as well?
yes, but we made those changes in our budget. Okay. So we're anticipating that loss.
And we saw that in the workshop?
Correct.
Okay. Scott?
Scott Sanders, Finance Director. Thank you, Mayor. I just want to make sure it was clear that the first action was amending the 2013 budget, and that information was provided in an earlier workshop, with the exception that Doug brought up. The housing budgets are included as part of the city's larger budget, and that's why we take care of those in advance of approving the entire city budget. But again, we like to have those separate workshops that deal with the housing. So at this point, Doug and his staff have made adjustments for what the known changes are at the federal level. And he's given you an advance indication that it could be worse yet, that may need additional amendments. So yes, there's a very high likelihood that we will have to come back to further amend, well, hopefully not 13, but further amend the 14 budget at some point in the near future. It does not impact city tax rates or the city's general fund at all. I just want to be clear on that as well. But they are part of our total budget, so that's why we need to have the process that they approve theirs first.
I appreciate your clarification. However, we are asked by HUD directly to oversee this, and as part of our agenda, much like our city council agenda, we have a lot of supportive information. There isn't any supportive information on this particular ask, which probably should be included as part of this for public record as well as for us voting on it. And because it is, as you say, a federal ask, there also is a direct federal ask of this board and me as chair to sort of say that I saw all this.
Yeah, and I apologize, I don't mean to minimize any of that. The key here is that we need to pull those documents out of the housing, or out of the city's budget.
Or a
that-
summary would help
that
as part of
summarizes
like
the
a
housing.
blue letter
So,
stuck in these municipal housing agencies so that it would be somewhat helpful as we're voting.
excellent.
I think
Yes.
Could I just ask, on these items that we're talking about, Doug and Scott, because of the significant impact it has on our housing and the fact that we have Knight and Holland, I'm hoping that we're working directly with Knight and Holland to make them aware.
It'd be Holland and Knight.
Or not Holland and Knight. It's the right firm though, right?
Right.
So that they can be advocating on our behalf. What is the role that they're playing in all of this?
Mrs. Hensley, council members, your question's very appropriate, and just to frame it, the budgetary difficulties we're having with housing are a function of these cuts in federal funds, as Doug ROMIG has pointed out. And one of the sidebars to that is not only the federal actions on the budget, but also HUD's decisions with regard to how we use these development funds, of which we have $10 million or so. Every time we ask a question, we don't get an answer that allows us to use those funds to help with these funding difficulties. It's my view that we need to probably up-tempo that ask, both by using H&K and seeking their advice, and also by working with the mayor in approaching HUD and seeing if we can get some better accommodation of our various requests. Because there are solutions out there, but we're not seeming to get to those solutions very effectively. So what you're talking about, Mrs. Hensley, is in my view, is about trying to be more effective at getting those kind of actions and decisions out of HUD. I think we ought to make a stronger effort to do that, and that would be my hope going forward. These budget issues, and Scott has explained it properly, and I certainly understand the mayor's concerns about the documentation not being here, and I think we can certainly do a better job to it. But just to summarize it, Scott, to be clear for the audience, the information about the HUD or the housing department budget is in the citywide budget, so the data is there. I think what's lacking is a concise summary of it for the mayor and council.
Well, not only that, but there's been other changes, as Doug has pointed out, that affect these budgets that is part of the sequestration and other actions that have yet to take place. In certain cases, we're guessing what that's going to be, and yet we're asked to vote on. Is there a deadline on this, Doug, that we have to pass these amendments? Because it's, you know, one of my concerns also is that we're asked to amend a budget prior to knowing, you know, what the revenues are going to be that we're going to operate our public housing whole section, number one. Number two, as you pointed out so clearly, we've got lots of people that we satisfy needs in your public housing operation, plus you have a whole lot of people that are on Section 8s, and we have 5,300 families waiting to get on, and we're kind of out there waiting for certain decisions to be made in Washington and people with a lot of need. Go ahead.
In response, yes, we have a little bit of time for the federal budget as far as approving this and submitting the certified statement to HUD. Our agency plan, this goes with our agency plan, which is due in April. March, April. Yeah, so we'd have probably 2 council meetings for our budget, but it does impact the city's budget and what they've got to submit to the state, and I'll let Scott address that piece because they're tied together.
But this budget also, if we certify our own budget, is unaffected by this federal position because our whole public housing agency is funded through the federal government, correct?
Correct. So my recommendation would be, again, it's very fluid. on the housing, because of the federal involvement, would be we need a starting point for the budget within the citywide aspect. So I would recommend that you approve that and make amendments as we have better information from the federal government.
Can I ask?
Skip?
I've got a question of Doug. You'd made the statement, this would give us the opportunity to right-size the organization through attrition. Who's attrition, employees or clients?
No, Section 8 clients. So instead of pulling back somebody that has assistance, if we know that we've got to cut 200 families from our program, once the
And this
federal
is the one
budget
that
is
has
approved.
5,300 on the waiting list?
Correct. If we would have to reduce the number of vouchers that we're currently issuing, we would do it through attrition. So we would want to use our development funds to carry those families until the federal budget is approved and we know what our numbers are.
Thank you.
Chris?
Can I go back to the timing on this? Because I think the mayor asked a wise question a minute ago. Later on the city council agenda, we could pass our budget, which is what would be required for the state to have done, and meet ours. But can't we do that and hold approval of the housing services a meeting until we could get some additional information and maybe know a little bit more? Or do they have to be congruent at this point? I'm not quite sure what does the federal government want to know what our city budget is for this, or?
No, the federal government would not be using those numbers. They would be using the budget that would be submitted directly to the feds. So as long as the action during the city budget item includes the housing that's there now in the documents, I guess I would not have a problem then with delaying the actual federal submittal of the budget.
Or would you prefer, based upon what you've said previously, well, 5 minutes ago, that we approve it and amend it as appropriate?
Amend the city's budget?
Well, no, amend this housing budget. We're gonna pass our budget. We're not gonna amend it.
Good point. From the housing authority, I guess I would defer if it makes most sense to go ahead and approve what you've got and amend it, or defer it and approve the city-wide budget later tonight.
Well, we're gonna do that anyway, right?
Yes.
So that's a given.
Hopefully.
I guess I don't see a difference between the two.
Yeah, I think that's probably a policy decision for this board.
I think what we asked Mr. Coleman underlined is there a problem with any federal government or other state budgetary filings that we need to do this one tonight as part of this other budget? And it would seem like, from what you're saying, we can set our own policy, but I'm a little...
Again, it doesn't, we need to have our budget certified by April when we submit our agency plan. So we probably have 2 more meetings before we have to certify our federal budget to send off to HUD. So as long as the city's budget isn't changed as of what's being adopted tonight, it would be amended as we do our changes within housing, because they integrate it into the city's budget as an expense and revenue.
If sequestration goes into effect on Friday, you're saying that this budget could be cut another 6.5%?
Yeah, they're looking at 6% across the board. So that's about 120,000 in public housing,
I thought it was
$1 million in housing.
It's 3% better.
Well, it's partway through the fiscal year, so they're telling us to adjust for, it's prorated.
Okay.
So
But in
they're saying-
actuality, there's also the possibility that you don't have resolution to some of these other items by the time you would come back to the council, even if we did defer approval of your budget as in item 3.
Correct.
I don't think this is any different than the school districts that wrestle with allowable growth, but they have to pass their budgets by whatever it is, March 15th, and they don't know what allowable growth is till April 3rd. They still pass a budget, and then they can amend their budget. The budget's just a framework moving forward based on the information we know. So I think
They
that's,
can amend it. They could also amend their levy, too, I think.
well, I mean, the federal government,
We
in July could decide that they're not going to fund HUD anymore. And, I mean, there's any number of possibilities, but we have to pass a budget based on the framework that we understand today, which I think is what this does. I'm not sure.
Mr. Manager?
Mr. Mayor, council members, my suggestion to you, and there's a lot of moving parts here, and my concern is they're not going to be resolved in the next week or two, and it's going to drag out. My hope is that you would approve this based on the variables and the best information we have today. If there are changes in it, and we are reasonably confident there will be changes, we'll bring those back to you, and we'll have to go through some process to deal with them. But I would suggest going ahead and approving this and getting this template down, and then we got something to work off of.
How about a slight change on this? What if we approved it, anticipating that we're going to approve our overall, but that we ask staff not to submit it until a date closer to April 1st, and we would like more detailed information and an update, so we might choose to even amend it before we submitted it.
Mr. Coleman, I think, yes, I think that would be terrific. So if your motion would be to approve it with a direction not to submit it until what's your due
You get
date?
updated information from,
Yeah, I think we have
And
to submit
reported
our
it to
information by
council, to the board.
mid-April.
to the board, right.
Okay, so by April 1st or thereabouts, we'll make sure the information comes back to you. You'll be given an opportunity to review that, and if we need to make amendments or you so direct, we will do that and bring that back to you.
Yeah, I'd look at this as a tentative budget with the idea that it is subject to amendment before it gets finalized. So, go ahead.
So
Right.
if that's okay with everybody, I'll make that motion. We approve it, we don't submit it until closer to the date and after council has been apprised of any action taken or impact by the federal budget discussions and any proposed amendments that we want to make before we submit it.
Now, just to be clear, in the event there is no information forthcoming before that date that we have to submit it, given this action, I assume we would be authorized to go ahead and submit it. So
Is there a date specific that is like the state, March 15th, a drop dead date?
Yes, but I don't recall exactly that
Can
date.
you
I think
find
it's,
that out
I think
for
it's, I will. I believe it's mid-April.
Okay.
I think you'd be authorized, but only after you've reported and given council a chance to
I
respond.
understand.
We don't need another bit of action, but it shouldn't happen until you've had comment time from the council.
That's fine.
6 yes.
Item 4 is approving the certification of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development HUD on the approval of the amended operating budget for all projects for fiscal year ended June 30, 2013, and of the proposed operating budget for all projects for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2014. Anything on this, Doug? This is just approving the certification?
Correct. This action actually would follow the previous roll call motion that was made, that this would be deferred until more information was provided and the finalizing date to submit to HUD.
Okay.
So this action would be deferred until that other
would
action
follow.
occurs.
I'll move item 4 based upon the,
All right, item's been moved. Anybody in the
Same motion.
yeah, same
audience
motion.
want to make comment on this? Seeing none? Mr. Coleman?
Sorry.
6 yes.
Item 5 is authorizing negotiations and approving the conveyance of the Des Moines Municipal Housing Agency to the Greater Des Moines Habitat for Humanity for disposition sale of 1227, 1233, 1239, and 1251 East 17th Street, Board Communication number 13-075. Is there anybody in the audience to speak to this?
Seeing none, I'd move this. These houses, existing ones are in disrepair and needs a lot of attention, and this Habitat will do a good job with them.
Okay. Anybody in the audience? Seeing none? Motion's been made. Mr. Coleman?
6 yes.
Item 6 is approving the license agreement with Quest Corporation doing business as Century Link QC to install telecommunications facilities at South View Manor at 2417 Southwest 9th Street, Board Communication number 13-078. Anybody here to speak to this?
I'll move item 6.
Item 6 been moved.
6 yes.
All right, that brings us to the end of our agenda. Could we have a motion to adjourn? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We sit adjourned. Thank you.
Well done, Mayor.
All right, let's quickly move to our city council. Prior to the start of our meeting, we were going to have a quick message or invocation from our own member, Chris Coleman, and we'd ask those of you who would participate to stand at this time.
Thank you. I'm a Catholic, and Assisi is a town in Italy that's produced some wonderful saints. This is a prayer of St. Agnes. Lord, help us cherish each moment of our lives. In the midst of suffering and pain, give us strength and guidance. With every action, let us find peace within our souls and comfort within our hearts. Help us learn forgiveness and bless those who have wronged us. Grant us mercy and compassion towards our enemies and loving kindness for those for whom we care. Let us enjoy the endeavors of this life and live each day to the fullest. For we have sacrificed a day of our lives, which is gone forever, in order to accomplish our dreams today. Amen.
All right, we'll call our meeting to order and quickly ask the clerk to take roll.
County,
Here.
Coleman,
Here.
Moore. Here. Griess, Mahaffey.
Here.
Hensley.
Here.
Meyer.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Item 2 is approving the agenda as presented and/or as amended.
Move.
Any comments, suggestions? Hearing none, we have a motion.
7 yes.
Item 3 is approving the consent agenda tonight. Those are items 3 through 31. And these are items that we take as a singular vote unless someone pulls them with for separate discussion or clarification, either by the council or anybody from the audience can choose to do so. Tonight, item 5, Councilmember County and Moore vote no. Item 25, Councilmember Hensley wishes to speak. All right. Item 4A has been withdrawn. The inspections are incomplete. Item 16I has been added, accepting the resignation of Sam Bakam from the Human Rights Commission, seat number 2. That is effective immediately. And item 16-1A is a recommendation from Councilmember Skip Moore to appoint Nancy Trotter to the Human Rights Commission, seat 2, for a 3-year term commencing April 1st, 12, to expire on April 1st of 2015. Are there any other items anyone would have pulled for further discussion? Seeing none,
I'll move.
all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Item passes unanimously. Takes us quickly to item 25. Item 25 is regarding the Des Moines Social Club, Council Communication number 13-105. A is approving the evidence of financing and business plan and authorizing the conveyance of the Central Fire Station number 1 at 900 Mulberry Street. B is approving the support for a State of Iowa Community Attraction and Tourism CAT grant project and economic development grant. Mrs. Hensley.
You know, I'm happy that we've gotten to this point, and I plan to move item 25. What I want to discuss, though, with the council and make a reference back to the city manager is, in the blue letter, it clearly states in there that the city will grant an additional $10,000 grant to the Des Moines Social Club, and this is to fulfill the requirement of the Community Attraction and Tourism, the CAT grant that we refer to it as. And my concern about this is, there are several concerns. Number one, if we'll all recall, Bravo has 2/7 of our hotel motel dollars, and we actually set aside a pot of money that could be the match for all communities that have projects to fulfill this requirement. And it's been in existence for probably 4 or 5 years when we started getting a lot of requests, so that they would not, in other words, be double dipping, getting hotel motel monies through Bravo and then having to come to the respective city and request additional funds. So what I would like to do is go ahead and move item 25A, move 25B with the stipulation, though, that the city manager go back and have a conversation with the board and the staff at the CAT grant and revisit that issue, because Bravo has already designated another $25,000 that would go for the capital improvements for the Des Moines Social Club. So you've got $25,000 specifically out of Bravo. You've got a reduced purchase price of the building. There's an agreement that was agreed to 4 or 5 years ago that would address these issues, and I think it's double dipping for them to come back and ask the city to do an additional $10,000. So I'm supportive of the project. They have their house in order. I'm happy that it's able to move forward, but I'd just like the city manager to take one more pass at this and work with Bravo and individuals that were involved in those original meetings to see if we can resolve that.
All right.
That's my motion.
Mr. Mayor, can I just, Mrs.
Mr.
Hensley, can I
Manager?
just clarify your motion? So we will do that, and I think there's at least a fair chance that we'll be able to get Bravo to participate in that fashion. In the event they don't, I assume your motion is such that we're authorized to proceed as
Absolutely,
recommended.
yes.
Okay. Any comment from the public? Seeing none?
7 yes.
All right.
Onward.
Thank you all for coming down. You bet. We are now, that completes the consent agenda. That takes us directly to the hearings. Let's note that they start at 5:05. First item on the hearings is item 34 on the vacation conveyance of the east 12 feet of East 33rd Street right-of-way from vacated Thompson Avenue to a point 282 feet north to St. Joseph's Church of Des Moines, Polk County, Iowa, for the expansion and construction of a parking lot, $350. Council Communication Number 13-079. A is the first consideration of this ordinance, and B is the final consideration of the ordinance above. The waiver is requested by the applicant and requires 6 votes. Is there anybody in the audience to speak to this item? Seeing none?
Seeing none, I'll move item 34 and 34A and B.
Coleman.
7 yes.
I usually get it on the second.
Item 35, on the vacation conveyance of the west 15 feet of 24th Drive between Franklin and Washington Avenue to Eric Reisenberg, trustee of the Eric J. Reisenberg Living Trust for a fence construction and residential side yard expansion. Again, $350. Council Communication Number 13-080. A is the first consideration of this ordinance, and B is the final consideration. The waiver is requested by the applicant and requires, again, 6 votes. Is there anybody in the audience here to discuss this item 35 regarding 24th Drive between Franklin and Washington? Seeing none, could we have a motion?
I'll move.
Item's been moved.
Yes, sir.
7 yes.
Item 36, dismiss the public hearing on conveyance of property at Indianola and Dunham Avenue to the Neighborhood Development Corporation, NDC, for a housing development. $198,000. NDC has withdrawn their offer at this time. Anybody here to discuss this?
I'll move 36.
7 yes.
Item 37, a request from the Hubble Realty Company for review and approval of an amendment to the River Point Flex Office Park West PUD conceptual plan at 510 Southwest 9th Street to allow the development of 10.5 acres of vacant land for development of 9 mixed-use 4-story buildings with a total of 339 residential units on floors 2 to 4, 4,554 square feet of clubhouse, and up to 85,485 square feet of first-floor commercial space with an option for first-floor parking spaces in lieu of 35,000 square feet of that commercial space. A is approving the amended and restated urban renewal development agreement with Hubble Realty Company, the Hubble Terminal Corporation, and 510 Southwest 9th Street LLC for the redevelopment of property bounded by Dart Way and Southwest 9th, Southwest 11th, and Murray Streets for a mixed-use development and approving the proposed conceptual development plan, Council Communication number 13-098. Is anyone in the audience here to speak to this item?
Mr. Mayor, Council, Steve Niebuhr with Hubble Realty Company, 6900 Westtown Parkway, West Des Moines, Iowa. Just here really to answer any questions. We've been to Urban Design Review Board twice, took their input, made some modifications to the plans. I know they're comfortable with it. They passed it, moved it on. We also were at P&Z about 3 weeks ago. We passed. There was some discussion from DART, and we've since met with DART and modified our plan, moved one of our buildings, changed our drive configuration, also made sure that we had taken into consideration the DART bus stop and how it would integrate into our sidewalk system. So we alleviated their concerns, and I'm just here really to answer any questions. Really, this is a reaction to the market. Obviously, we were going to do flex office down there to begin with. The market's changed. We want to get this project going forward, and we think residential with a mixture of commercial on the first floor is a way to do it. So here to answer any questions.
Steve, market rate?
Excuse me?
Market rate housing?
Correct. Yep.
All right.
And I do appreciate the condition in there that it would be assessed commercial unless there were some competing properties that came in that were assessed as residential. I think that's a very appropriate resolution to that issue, so thank you.
We
Appreciate
just don't
it.
want to be at a competitive disadvantage.
I understand.
So I think we addressed that with staff, and we're both happy. So
Appreciate that.
All right, Steve, thank you. Is there anybody in the audience to make any comment? Seeing none, Council?
I'll move item 37, 37A, and look forward to you getting started.
Item's been moved. Any comments?
7 yes.
Steve, good luck. Thank you. Item 38, conditionally approving the urban renewal agreement for the sale of real estate to Helena Industries, Inc. for an expansion of its regional office and industrial facility at 3525 Vandalia Road and to continue to February 25th, 2013. This was continued from January 28th, 2013, Council Communication number 13-104. Anybody here to speak to this item?
Are we set on this then, or? Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Troy Hugan, Mayor and Council, Plant Manager for Helena Industries here in Des Moines and available for questions. And I do have one additional piece of information I shared with Ms. Connor. Because of the continuance on the paperwork, we actually have received internal approval to proceed immediately upon City Council approval. So we are ready to go to planning and groundbreaking as soon as we have approval. We've been dialoguing with the city since Vision Fuels backed out of the property a little over 4 years ago.
Why is the motion and to continue to February 25th?
That's it?
That's today.
I guess that's today.
That's today, why are we?
We're not.
Just
It'll be
continue
here
from.
today.
Last time.
Today's
last
the
meeting, we
day.
continued to the 25th.
I forgot to scratch that out, sorry.
Okay, that's what I'm asking. So it's just a clerical error.
From the continue.
So your
Continued
motion
from
is,
February
I understand, but it says, and to continue to February 25th.
That was on the last
I
agenda.
understand that. But what is your request today? Do we have to change this motion other than the Scrivener's error?
I don't believe so.
Okay, I'll move 38 then.
I do have a question on that, though.
I never thought I'd use
Anybody
the
here
word
to comment?
scrivener's error, ever.
It's been moved. Mrs. Hensley?
My question would be, back to your comment, since you have approval from your corporate office.
Right.
Is this subject to us having to have approval at Waterworks, or can he go ahead and start with the city approving it at this point?
That is the condition for approval, is the approval of Waterworks.
Okay, and it said in the blue letter, it's not going to, or I guess maybe it was a question I asked, that was not going to happen until March, but they do have a meeting tomorrow, a board meeting.
I don't believe it's on their agenda for tomorrow. We're still working on that.
Can I make a friendly motion that we add that they do it telephonically or sooner so that they're allowed to move forward, since it's not on their agenda tomorrow? I mean, why would we make them wait a whole nother month?
Yeah, I'll accept that amendment as soon as,
Okay.
as soon as Waterworks approves. Is that, what's
And
the
ask that they
amendment?
potentially have a special meeting to address this issue.
We can certainly make that.
Can we do that?
Okay.
Otherwise, it's great.
Yeah, it
Appreciate
is.
your
It's
patience.
wonderful.
Thanks. Thanks, Rita.
6 yes.
Item 39, on an appeal from Carrie Bauma from the conditions imposed by the Historic Preservation Commission on the issuance of a certificate of appropriateness for the replacement of windows at 1224 9th Street. Council Communication number 13-099. A is affirming the decision. The Historic District Commission had some imposed conditions or some alternative resolution as B, reversing that decision. All right. Is Carrie here?
Carrie Bauma, 1224 9th Street. We're wanting to put in vinyl windows in our house. We've gone through the Historical Preservation Commission, and they have denied the certificate of appropriateness for the double-hung vinyl windows.
Vinyl windows, yes. Our windows are a safety hazard to our child and children. The windows we have upstairs in one of the bedrooms is a fall hazard because it's not tempered glass when we bought them. And we're trying to replace them with a tempered glass window. And we're trying to change all the windows all out. Our windows are 72 inches tall by 34 inches wide. We're basically trying to better I think we're trying to better the neighborhood where we live at now. I have pictures of the windows that we have installed. It's kind of a long story of how this has come about because of the fact that we bought the house in 2010. The city put it in historic district in 2012. We bought the windows in 2012 without knowing we were in historic district. There is a petition that's out there that my wife signed, but that was in 2011 to be in a historic district. But the petition, if you read the petition, doesn't state anything about windows, what kind of material, any kind of specifications on what you need to do or who you need to contact if it does. What I don't like about it is we never got any kind of certified letter from the city stating we were in a historic district. We never got a certified letter or a letter from the Riverbend Association themselves stating we're in a historic situation. So when I started this process, probably April, May, I called down to the city and I asked the city if there was anything special that I need permits. I said, all I'm doing is changing out my windows. I'm not redoing the structure, nothing. The gentleman down there, John, and didn't give him my address, but I just basically said, I'm not changing any window structures, or I'm not changing the structure of the windows, I'm just replacing the windows. He said, no, as long as you're not changing the structure of your house, you don't need a permit. So we went on from there. We bought the windows. The day that they were installed, going to be installed and delivered, a gentleman came to our house and stopped our workers, stating that we needed a certificate to put windows into our house. And here we are, basically. We've gone through the commission. They, 2 weeks later, invited us back. Basically, I think just, I don't know why, but they invited us back. And then now we're here to appeal to you guys. I think if you guys look at these windows, the pictures, and there's double prints in there.
You to put them down so
Yeah.
it's a little camera deal.
Yeah, Mr. Coleman, quickly put them down so the audience can see what we're talking about here.
I'm president of the Council AV Club.
And as you can see here are two of the windows. And what we've done is, these aren't the original windows. These aren't the windows that you go out to Window World and buy for $182. I've actually went and did research on windows. I had Window World come out, I had Champion come out, and then I had Iowa Lumber and Construction come out and look at our windows. These windows here, we spent roughly $500 a window to match the color of the original window that was in there before, and to match, basically, I think I think they're getting a little picky, but I think it matches just fine, because in all honesty, you cannot tell the difference between the wood window and the vinyl window.
So did you put some of these windows already in?
The windows that were being installed when we were told that we were in a historic district, the day we had them delivered and installed that day, we were told, a worker called me at work and said, hey, do you have some kind of certificate or something that you need? And I was like, well, I don't know what you mean by that. So that's when I started the whole process of finding out what was going on. And this is where we're at.
So did you replace all the windows then?
No, just 3 of them. I made them
Those
stop.
3 that we're looking at there above the front?
The three that are original, the one that's original, this one's original, this one's new, and these 2 are new. Now, when we went to the commission the second time, they nitpicked about a white strip that you see, and here's the white strip that they are nitpicking about this white strip right here. Well, it doesn't matter if you open up any wood window or any window, you're going to see a strip of white, because that's what's behind it. Now, if you take a look at that white strip and you take a look at the 2 windows here, you can see the white strip, but that's with the screen on, and you can't tell from the street if it's a wood window or it's a vinyl window. My concern in the whole situation is this. I have a 2-year-old daughter. I mean, we all have 2-year-old daughters, and they like to play around, and we like to raise the windows up. You know, we bought the house to preserve that area, I think, and we're trying to do the best we can. I mean, I don't have the $2,000 per window to have some guy come to my house and redo everything, because none of the original pulleys, none of the original weights are in there, and they want me to go back and put the original weights, original pulleys. We don't have that money. I spent, those windows that you see in there now are paid for. The rest of my windows are in my living room right now, in my dining room. I don't have the money to just throw away. And it was $13,000 to redo these windows that I think will do just as good, or if not better, than what we have now. And if you can tell on some of these, just to get picky like these guys are getting picky on us, that window right there is the one with the storm window, right there. It looks exactly like the one that's up there. Same ridges that they're complaining about, the same dimensions that they're complaining about. It's all the same. I mean, I've made as much, and we love the neighborhood, we love the area. I'm thinking if we can't get these windows in, we're going to move out.
What's your name again?
My name is Santos Rivas. I'm Carrie's husband.
Okay. Santos Rivas?
Yes, sir.
All right, so the Historic Preservation Commission found that these were not appropriate? Is
Correct.
that what happened? Okay.
Correct. Excuse me, except for one guy on the committee. The one guy on the committee who was actually a tradesman for a living, that's what he does. He's a construction worker. He's the one that didn't have a problem with the windows being installed.
Okay.
Everybody else did.
All right. Council, any questions?
I'd like to hear from the staff.
Okay. All right. Staff?
Mr. Mayor and members of council, Phil Delafield, Community Development Director, and I'm here to answer any questions you have. Mr. Price?
Phil, can you just kind of walk us through why the commission decided that these weren't in conformance with the standards?
I'd be happy to. Mayor and council, as you recall, the Historic Preservation Commission is charged with enforcing historic rehabilitation standards for properties in historic districts. And to that end, there are guidelines that are adopted by the city, and they reference the Secretary of the Interior's standards for historic preservation. There are documents that are available called preservation briefs, and it gives guidance on how alternative materials are to be evaluated. The preservation standards generally call for replacement with like materials in a like configuration in similar settings. But if alternate materials are to be used, then they should be used that match in composition, design, dimensions, durability, color, texture, visual properties, a bunch of items that are generally intended to preserve the historic fabric of the neighborhood. The commission went in some depth on the review of the materials here and tried to review to their satisfaction that these items are being met, and focused on several items that were, in their view, not similar to the historic fabric of the neighborhood. So those included the dimensions of the framing and the sash elements, the sash frame and glass depth, the track and the jambs that were previously referred to, and it was discussed this white versus matte finish, as also the screen framing and track, and then the proximity and the ability to distinguish the differences from the ground. So those were the elements that the commission evaluated in their process to determine whether or not the proposed materials are equivalent to what the standards envisioned by the Secretary of the Interior.
And why did the commission, just reading through the blue letter, it looked like they reviewed this twice?
That's true. The Historic District Commission wanted to review some of the elements that they had discussed earlier in more detail, items such as the sash depth and the track, the jamb, the appearance. So they, at their request, reopened the item and then reaffirmed their original action.
They reaffirmed their denial?
That was at one of the commissioners' requests?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Bill, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else?
Nancy Stillion, 1604 24th Street Place. I'm wondering if there's anyone from the Historic Preservation Commission here. I came for a later item, but what I am wondering is how the Historic Preservation District Commission can spend so much time and interest and attention to this in a neighborhood where people are struggling to upgrade neighborhoods and pay no attention to the Lustron House.
I think that'll be on an item in a little while.
But it is, what is, you are the council, what is the goal, the mission, the purpose of the Historic District Commission. Now, the gentleman who just described their convening and their position on it was the one who told me that his department's mission was development. Does development also mean costs to the consumer who are trying to do the same thing, where all kinds of flip-flops and acrobatics take place in this city when someone wants a developer to be able to put something that is totally inappropriate between 32nd and 33rd Street on Forest. Now, where is the historic district on the Lustron House and on the vernacular quality of neighborhoods in this town? Where is the Historical Commission? Now, we have in Des Moines Magazine last summer, page after page after page, touting the good works of the architects in the city. Where are the architects who are supposed to be trained in the history of built environments? Des Moines as a city is becoming so botched up because of the lack of coherence in our built environment. Someone wants us here, oh, look, put it there, yes. Never, I was privileged to work with the Architects in Schools program when I worked for the State Arts Council. I was then privileged to serve on the National Endowment's architecture panel. And then later, Iowa was the first state to have an architecture in state, art in state buildings program in the nation. Those days are gone. The quality of the architects, the quality of the architectural oversight, it's all gone. And people are asleep at the switch. And instead of being, as I put it in an email a week or so ago, a whore to development, you as the city council need to bring the city back into some kind of intellectual cultural intelligence. I decided I would be so calm and so pleasant, but you can see that that's impossible when it concerns things I care about. When our history goes, Lost Des Moines, look at it on Facebook. When our history goes, the city, the quality of the city as a world-class city deteriorates, and it is deteriorating so fast that, you know, I'm not going to be here to see too much more of it, so, you know, whatever. But it is one of the things that really pains me more than any of the other things that have to do with culture that this city has something to do with. If you could do something about the school district, that'd be a different matter, and I would be even more passionate.
I have something I'd like to bring up to attention too, real quick.
Do we want, go ahead.
There's one stipulation on this whole project, and it's this window here that I've been told that is the historic value of the house, and it's one of the things that's in their little, that they have, that they want us to keep this window in because for some odd reason they believe that it is tied to the house. I don't think so. If you guys know our house was burnt from the bottom up in the middle. Our house was going to be condemned in 2000 by the city. I would like to make sure that if this goes through and if we guys decide yes, that I can replace that window too. That's all I got to say.
All right, Santos, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
All right, let's go ahead and close the hearing and open it for discussion.
Luckily, they told us to do it last time, so I did it.
I hate these things. They're tough to decide on. You've got a family who's looking out for, the interests of their family. There's costs associated with the steps that they've already taken. And from my layman's perspective, there's not a significant difference in the type of window that's being put in here. With that being said, Ms. Bauma signed the petition to be a part of the historic district. By signing that, whether it said on that petition or not, there was the expectation that the neighborhood would become a part of the historic district. And by signing that petition, either directly or indirectly agreed to the terms of the historic district. And that fact is really hard for me to get over. And also, we've got a commission specifically tasked with determining historic values and whether windows are or not compliant with the architectural guidelines that have been set in place. So I'm really torn on these type of issues, but as we've said in the past, the only way the historic district is successful moving forward is if we're consistent in holding the line and supporting the district, the historic district commission. And so I would love to hear your input, but my thought is to uphold the commission's decision.
Okay, is that in form of motion?
Yes, unless there's other discussion, and I would be open to another motion.
All right, let's, counsel, Christine?
I agree with everything that you're saying based upon the difficulty and the fact that you've incurred expenses. We've had a number of other related issues along the very same line. And, if you look at the value, and I'll take Sherman Hill, for example, and what's transpired in Sherman Hill, because we've really stuck to the requirements, the value has increased there significantly more so than any place else in the country or in the city. So there are some real economic impacts as a result of that. Having said that, River Bend, I think, is a little bit different, but we have a precedent, and we need to stick with the precedent that we set. So I'll support the motion.
Okay. We have a motion. Any further discussion?
6 yes, 1 no.
All right. Santos and Kerry, I'd suggest talk with our community development folks and work through, where you go from here on this. So we appreciate very much your coming down.
Thank you.
Item 40, on reclassification of the Ambassador Medical Transport Services to operate a paratransit service to a certificate of public convenience and necessity to operate a limousine company, Council Communication number 13-085. Is there anybody in the audience? Before these young people leave, do you want to, let's recognize them. Can you tell us, looks like we have some Boy Scouts? Are you from Des Moines? Yep. All right, where are you guys from?
We're located at the First Federated Church of the 40th Franklin.
All right, good. And what is the purpose tonight? You guys have a badge we're working on for? All right. Well, we want to thank you all for coming down. We hope that you have enjoyed your time down here. Let's
Definitely get a badge for that.
absolutely. You guys ought to get 2 badges for this one with stars below. And but let's give these young people a good hand. These are. You guys, we can look forward to you sitting up here one of these days.
Thank you.
Okay, We just read item 40 on the Ambassador Medical Transport Services. Anybody here to speak? Hearing none, we've got a motion. Any discussion?
Seven yes.
Item 41, on a recommended capital improvement program, CIP, for the fiscal years 2013, 2014 through 2018 and 2019. Council Communication number 13-107. Is there anybody here to discuss this item? All right, seeing none, could we have a motion? Item 41, the capital improvement plan.
I have a question of the manager. I don't see anything in here about any viaducts. Could you tell me how we would go about getting a viaduct on the CIP in the future?
Mr. Moore, council members, you are correct. There are not funds identified in the recommended CIP for a viaduct. The engineering department advises me, and I'm looking back here at Jeb, that the cost of a viaduct would be in the $15 million range if it were to be constructed, and my guess is it might end up more than that. So it's a very significant sum of funds. It has come to my attention, though, in conversations with you, Mr. Moore, and others around the table, Mr. Mahaffey, and others, that a viaduct would be appropriate and needed. My suggestion as a way to pursue that would be to authorize us to make some inquiry at the federal or state level of our delegation and see if federal funds or perhaps state funds might be available for such an adventure to defray the cost of construction so that the city funds can be stretched a little bit further. I really have no idea if that's feasible or not, but I think it makes some sense given the level of interest that's been expressed to me, and if council is interested in pursuing that, that we would be in a position, perhaps with the help of the mayor, to make some inquiry about that and then report that back to you in terms of whether or not that was a feasible course to pursue.
I'd like to add that as a friendly amendment to the motion.
Who moved it?
I'll support the amendment.
Okay.
Hallley, you moved it.
Seven yes.
Item 42. Item 42 is on the proposed issuance of the following public purpose bonds. Council Communication number 13-094. I want you all to know that we are going to take each one of these separately, so I will proceed now to present them one at a time. On the proposed issuance of the following, Council Communication number 13-094A is a $22,815,000 general obligation bond for essential corporate purposes. One under that is authorizing for additional action. Is there anybody here to speak to this item? Seeing none, could we have a motion on 42A?
Move.
Item 42A has been moved.
Seven yes.
Item 42B, $10,475,000 general obligation bonds, urban renewal purposes. One is the authorization for additional action. Anybody in the audience to speak to this item? Seeing none, could we have a motion on B?
Move.
Item B has been moved.
Seven yes.
Item C, $760,000 general obligation bond for general corporate purposes. One is authorization for additional action. Anybody here to speak to this? $760,000 general obligation, general corporate purpose bonds. Seeing none?
Seven yes.
Item D, $975,000 general obligation bonds for general corporate purposes. One under that is authorization for additional action. Anybody here to speak to this item?
I'll move 42D.
Seven yes.
Item E, $775,000 general obligation bonds for, again, general corporate purposes. One is authorization for additional action. Anybody here to speak to this item?
Move 42E.
E has been moved.
Seven yes.
F, $935,000 general obligation bonds, general corporate purposes. One, authorization for additional action. Anybody here to speak to this? $935,000. Item's been moved.
Seven yes.
Item G, $36,735,000 general obligation bonds and levying a tax for payment. Again, general obligation bonds in the amount of $36,735,000. Anybody to speak to this item?
Mr. Mayor, could we have an explanation on this because of the levying of tax per pavement? I'm sure people are going to ask about that.
Scott?
Scott Sanders, Finance Director.
Could you just explain this one because it's got a tax tagged on it, tagged on the end of it?
Yeah, absolutely. This last action and vote is essentially the amount of budgeted debt service that needs to be included in the 2014 budget. The real purpose of having these hearings today, as opposed to closer to when we issue the bonds in May, is the need to be able to, what is considered a pre-levy, being able to include that into the budgeted amount with the anticipation that it's about $2 million worth of debt service that will be paid over the next 12 months.
But we're not increasing taxes at this time.
Now, again, as stated this morning, that was part of the plan, and in actuality, the tax rate associated with debt service will be going down for 2014.
Thanks, Scott.
Item been moved?
Yes. Seven yes.
All right, that completes the bond voting. Item 43, an amendment to the annual budget for the current fiscal year ending June 30, 2013, Council Communication number 13-107. Anybody in the audience to speak to this item?
I'll move 43.
Seven yes.
Item 44, on the proposed annual budget for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2014, Council Communication number 13-107. Anybody in the audience to speak to this?
I'll move 44 and just make a comment that I think clearly the two-year budget cycle has been very, very effective for the city. And it makes it a lot easier the second year, but it's quite a lot of work that first year.
It was a good idea, wasn't it?
It is.
I wonder who came up with it.
You saying it was you?
For either one of you, for that matter.
Seven yes.
Okay, that completes the hearings. City Manager would like to make a quick comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. A couple of thanks in order when you take such a major action as approving the budget. First, thanks to the council. You did sit through innumerable council workshops. I know those are really exciting presentations, but you were steadfast in your interest, and your comments and questions throughout the process were excellent. And also, just thanks to the staff out here in the office, in the audience. Dan Ritter, our chief budget officers here in the front. Dan and his staff do really a majority of the heavy lifting in preparing the budget, together with all of the departments that submit their budgets, and of course the guidance and leadership of Scott Sanders, our finance director, were all very, very helpful in producing this document. And it is somewhat rare in my experience to get to this point, even on the second year of a 2-year balanced budget, to get through this process and not have a single person appear in opposition to the budget. That's quite an accomplishment for everybody, including the mayor and council. So good work to everybody that participated in it.
550 million.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. This takes us back to item 32, which is ordinance's first consideration, amending Chapter 114 of the Municipal Code, adding parking meter spaces on Locust Street between 13th Street and 15th Street. Council Communication number 13-081. Is there anybody in the audience to speak to this, adding parking meters?
I'll move item 32 and request the second and third readings based upon non-pre-published be moved as well.
Seven yes.
Item 32I from Councilmember Chris Coleman to discuss his perspective on the inadvertent implications of recently approved liquor license regulations and past zoning requirements of C-stores, and to request the council initiate a process to address concerns of the council. Mr. Coleman.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being willing to suffer through a few minutes of comment from me. I feel pretty strongly about this, and I want to share this with the rest of the council. I'm one that gets a little frustrated when any one of us start asking our staff to do a whole bunch of things that there isn't some level of consensus about. And so I'm bringing this to you so that we can have a little discussion and to see if anybody agrees. Let me give you a little history from my perspective. A couple of years ago, the state passed a law that allowed smaller convenience stores or convenient type stores to sell liquor. And we had a number of applicants for Class C liquor license. That was the class that was set up. And after observing this for a couple of weeks, we set a moratorium, and then we studied and passed a rule to do something about it. I can't remember an issue that had more community support for trying to do something about it than this issue. And I think that the council made some really wise steps forward. And looking back on it a year later, I think there's some additional things that we can do to strengthen it. When I talk to neighbors, almost all of them can picture a C-store, a convenience store in their neighborhood or near their neighborhood that they think is a blight on their neighborhood. I can name them in my neighborhood, and I get worried as hell about some of the old C-stores that might turn into one of these things. But you want to know something? Nothing we did anything about that. In fact, we're perpetuating it and making it worse by not taking further action. So there's nothing about my comments here that's trying to make things looser on any of the bad operators in our neighborhoods that I think are really devaluing property, making neighborhoods less safe, and just causing an overall reduction in the quality of life in neighborhoods. Diane, can you show me, can you flash up my screen? I'm going to show you a map. I've carried it around with me every day since about November when somebody shared this with me. In essence, like tonight, I think we passed 3 or 4 Class C liquor license. We are essentially using our buffer system to make sure there's not a predominance of these in the neighborhoods. But in fact, we are also creating a situation where we're giving bad operators a city-imposed and regulated territory. Because nobody can move in and compete against them. They own that territory. We're treating those Class C liquor licenses in a lot of our neighborhoods like we hear about taxi cab badges in New York City, where they become a commodity and a value. And by the way we've constructed this, it's giving value to these bad operators, the very people that we didn't like and wanted to do something about.
Because they were grandfathered in.
Because they were grandfathered in. And because they were grandfathered in, we won't allow any competition in those neighborhoods through our ordinance. And so there's really no prospect where the market or regulations, because they're grandfathered in and existed in this period where the state passed the law, that's not our doing. But because they're grandfathered in and because we've restricted competition, there's not really any force, regulatory or in the market, that's going to cause them to go out of business or change their ways. And I think the council can arm itself with some additional regulations so we do something about this. This is not about being easier, but I think as much as we like to run around and tell neighborhood groups, hey, listen, the state passed that, there's nothing we can do about it, the fact is we can. It will take a long time, but our neighbors have been on us for a long time to somehow address the amortization of old crummy properties and how do we do things that are grandfathered in. I think the market, providing some competition in key areas and threatening that is the one way we can do something about it. And there are cities around Iowa that have imposed some unique things. For instance, they've granted new license in some areas through an accessory use permit. They've used PUD and other things to help guide how the market works in there. I'm not sure I have all the answers, but I do know that it's very frustrating to me that the entities that I know I want to do something about, that I think the neighbors were counting on us doing something about, are protected more than harmed through the ordinance that we passed. And my only goal today is that we have a little bit of a discussion. I've met with the city attorney and I've met with our planning department, our zoning officers, to learn a little bit more about this. I've referred on some other ordinances. Iowa City uses an accessory use permit that allows the council to have discretion on where places go, but it can create a little competition and I hope work some of these bad actors out of the marketplace. I'm not sure ultimately where we go. I don't have a proposal for you, but as I said in my request to be on the agenda, I would like, if the council agrees, I would like to pass this on to staff so that we continue to look at ways and maybe have them come back with ways where we can use the market to make sure that there's competition and the bad guys are pushed out of town. Those are the people that our neighbors are concerned about, and I think right now we're protecting them.
Okay, Brian asked to speak first, and as of today, what are there, including the ones that are on tonight, is there like 65 to 69 of them? Something like that? Somebody know?
We just had renewals on tonight. We have 65 currently.
Plus the renewals?
That includes the renewal.
Okay, 65 of them, go ahead.
The question I have for Councilman Coleman, when you use the term bad operator, what are you referring to in terms of, I mean, you're talking about bad operators. Are you talking about liquor license violations or?
I think sometimes they're liquor license operators. I think there's places that have done a poor job keeping up their properties. I think they are targeting, I have 4 teenage kids, and I walk in a couple of these places and I'm not very proud about the kinds of offerings that they have in there. To tell you the truth, and I don't want to make this about any one company, I invited some of our C-store companies when I knew that I was going to put this on the agenda, but I think there's some really good operators that I would prefer to be up the street from me than the people selling fake pipes and fake pot and other things. There's groups doing that, and it's frustrating.
It was, and this brings up a good point. And when we came up with the square footage idea on the restrictions, it was something that I think I voiced concern to the city attorney about, that we are creating this system of less competition is a commodity. I didn't use those terms, but I supported the compromise, but I was opposed to the larger square footage, largely because we were shutting out Walgreens and CVS Pharmacy and these others. But at the same time, I agree with you. I think there needs to be other standards applied, and that if we open it up, if we open it up to competition amongst all C-stores and everybody, I believe that it will have an effect of dispersing the liquor and people standing around buying the liquor, and not creating these islands of people where people can go and treat it like a liquor store, but rather if you want to buy liquor, you can go almost anywhere and buy it. So I'm supportive of looking at it again. I didn't particularly like the square footage idea, but those are my thoughts.
Christine, and then Skip.
You know, I echo Councilmember Coleman's comments here, because I've had discussions with some of the representatives from the C-stores, and just to go back to when we originally had this discussion, the issue came about because we were not successful in getting legislation overturned at the Capitol. And we were directed by the Alcoholic Beverage Commissioner to actually deal with it on a local basis. We've dealt with it on a local basis. We have unintended consequences, which I agree with. We have some great projects that individuals want to come into the community and actually build and upgrade, but because of the current ordinance we have, it's not possible. So the unintended consequence is the very people that we want to have here that are good corporate citizens are not the ones that we're going to get. So we need to look at it, but I would ask that, because the Alcoholic Beverage Commissioner understands alcohol density has become a significant issue as a result of this, that they need to be a player at the table. They need to be helping us find a solution to this. And I'm confident that they will want to work with us and help us get through this, because when they originally came out with the fiscal impact and the narrative, it was significantly less than what has happened. It's been an explosion as a result of that change in that law. And it's problematic for us. It's problematic for the neighborhoods. And I wouldn't rule out going back up to the legislature, because I'm not sure that we'll be able to do absolutely everything that we need to do here. Zoning was at the top of the list. Zoning is not working. So what are our other options? And they need to be there with us.
Skip.
I'm going to support you on this, because I think we need to take a look at it. But if you look at your map, and about East 28th, Court and University at East 30th, you've got 4 liquor licenses there.
Right here, Skip?
Yep. And the competition theory is not working there. We got 1 or 2 bad operators over there, and the good operators aren't running them out. We've got 2 C-stores that operate in the Des Moines area, and neither one of them are on the list for e-liquor license. I spoke to you about who they were earlier. The one that moved in Des Moines a couple years ago, listened to the neighborhood, said, fine, we will not seek e-liquor license. The neighborhoods don't want us to have it. And the other one bought some stores in Des Moines, and my understanding is they agreed not to seek e-liquor in those stores, even though they have it in the ones immediately outside of Des Moines. The other issue I've got, and I voiced this with you, and I've talked to Rick about it, is there was a corporation, major corporation, that after this law was passed, and we started issuing e-liquor license, they called me up and they were very upset because we were doing this and it was hurting them. Well, I went and checked the lobbying records up at the Capitol, and they remained neutral on it. So what they're trying to do is make it our problem when it was their problem too. If they didn't want that competition, I think that all these other people should have been in there lobbying up at the state Capitol opposed to it. And I think they should join us on this to go back to the Capitol and seek some changes. I don't recall any one of these businesses ever coming in saying, I can't make it without liquor. But as soon as the e-liquor became available, now we've got them coming here saying they're going to have to close if they don't get it. But, I'll agree to this. I think we should go back and look at it. But what I'm hearing almost 100% from our residents is they're thankful we did what we did, and they wished we could tighten it up even more.
Hallie.
I'm actually with Skip on this one. I'm willing to, take another look at it. I would make 2 points. One, I think competition is always good in terms of the quality of business. I thought that before we passed the zoning issues with payday lenders and all of those different things, as well as this. But I don't think competition is going to drive out the problem, in my opinion. Staff can look at it, but you've got several here where there's 3 or 4 literally right on top of each other, and that's, I don't know that competition's the answer to the problem that we're looking for. And secondly, I agree with you that there's good corporate citizens and there's businesses that are a blight on communities. Ironically, though, when we first discussed all this, when it first came up, who were the ones that were trying to get all the e-liquor licenses? All the ones we're talking about being the good corporate citizens, and we had that whole discussion of, well, you own a gas station on every corner, we're going to have alcohol, and, so the same quote-unquote good businesses that we originally designed this to prohibit from coming in on every corner, now we're saying, well, you're better than the alternative. And so it's just an ironic turn, if nothing else. So I'm willing to have staff relook at this. I'm not sure that I have the right answer, and I'm not sure that more competition is going to be the right answer, but I think it's worth looking at.
Anybody else?
I would agree we should take another look at it or refer it to staff and the city manager take another approach, because I'm not sure that what we've done has helped us in any way, because, like the one Skip pointed out, competition has not driven out the ones that we didn't want there in the first place. They're still there. So,
You guys can speak. I think somebody wants to speak, Mayor. Is that all right?
Sure.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Nikki DePhillips, and I'm the Senior Vice President of Come and Go Convenience Stores, 6400 Westtown Parkway. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today. I want to make it clear, we really want to invest in the city of Des Moines. We've built one store in the city in the last 4 years, and we want to build more. Our strategy is to rebuild all of our stores. And so as you look around Des Moines, we're pretty consistently inconsistent with our assets. We have assets of all types out there. And so our goal is to rebuild and then also build several new stores. So right now our plan in the next 3 years is to build 6 locations. And 4 of those we had planned for this year. We were working through the city approval process on a few of those locations, and then this liquor issue came up, and it really caused us just to pause and rethink and see, can we build at the locations that we want to build, and honestly, can we execute our strategy in Des Moines? Regarding liquor, prior to 2011, we were actually allowed to sell liquor in convenience stores, but you had to have a separate room and a separate register to do that. So when they changed it, what they did was they just removed that requirement. And so as we came in, we were then able to put liquor into a few locations. We didn't put it in everywhere. And I'd like to stress that for us, liquor really is an accessory use. We're not a liquor store. It's a small percentage of our sales, but it's something that we feel that is a convenience to our customers, and so that's why we'd like to have it. A second issue that I'd like to bring up, along with a liquor issue, is just the site plan approval process. City staff has the full list of some of the difficulties that we've run into, but it requires extra open space, P&Z approval, canopy height restrictions, and then also PUD triggers that other retail users don't have to go through. So we have to go through a few extra steps just because we sell fuel. And so that's something that I'd also like to request that staff looks at if you feel that that's appropriate. So in close, I guess we're just like any other business. We just want consistency and predictability in cities where we choose to invest in. And we really do want to invest in the city of Des Moines, and I ask that you take a look at the liquor and then also the site plan ordinances. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
I agree you're a great corporate citizen and we want you to invest in the city of Des Moines, but let me be very honest with you. The legislation that was passed was shepherded by Come and Go. And so the unintended consequence of what we're dealing with here at this council table, you were the ones that were pushing it up to the Capitol. So we're trying to deal with that, and I hope that we get it dealt with, but I just want to be very upfront about that.
And we would be happy to help through that process.
So are you going to go back up to the Capitol and help us reverse what was passed?
Well, I think I could have Jason Bassett speak to that also. He's our Director of Government Affairs, but he's been at the Capitol.
But I just want to make sure you understand where the legislation came from.
Thank you.
Nikki, thank you. Anybody else? All right, let's go ahead. Mr. Coleman,
I'd
do you
like
want
to
make a motion?
Yeah, I'd like to refer my comments and request that staff look at alternatives, at ways that other municipalities in Iowa are dealing with this, and to report back to the council in, how long, Rick?
If you would give us, well, I think basically the process that you've talked about would include some dialogue with the state. I think that's appropriate. So I would say 45 days at a minimum.
Well, why don't we say 45 days? I mean, I know that we're inching towards a building season and a construction season, and that would be helpful, I think, to.
Well, Mr. Coleman, we'll do it as quickly as we can, but there's a variety of steps in there that are going to take some time to have dialogue.
The other thing I think is Mrs. Hensley has brought up is if we want some legislative help, it better happen before 45 days. At least we better get some stuff on the table.
Yeah.
We better get some stuff.
So that's my motion.
Seven yes.
I know.
All right, takes us to communication reports from Sarah Altraggy of 683 32nd Street to speak on behalf of the Des Moines Historical Society regarding historic preservation efforts in Des Moines, Iowa.
Hi, everybody. Mayor and Council, thanks for having me tonight. I'm going to speak quickly. I know I don't have only a few minutes, and I do have some images there to project. I'm here today in my role as president of the Des Moines Historical Society to discuss with you some issues that we feel require some attention. To begin, on February 14th, which was Valentine's Day, I received an urgent email at 10:10 a.m. from a staff member at Salisbury House stating that crews had arrived at 4111 Tonawanda Drive next door, and they were beginning the process of demolishing the home on that property. This was particularly upsetting to Salisbury House because its foundation had wished to purchase the home. It was a unique Lustron home built and owned for 36 years by Everett Hud Weeks, son of Carl and Edith, who built Salisbury House. They just simply could not afford to expend what it would take to acquire, refurbish, maintain, and operate a full property in addition to Salisbury House. In December of 2012, the home and lot was purchased by a developer. Can you just show the picture? To give you a bit of perspective and a little history lesson, Lustron homes are made of a prefabricated enameled steel and were developed post-World War II in response to a shortage of housing for returning GIs. The low-maintenance, extremely durable finish attracted modern families who did not have the time or interest in repairing and painting conventional homes. Built at the end of the Lustron manufacturing era, 4111 Tonawanda was a custom design incorporating elements of two prefabricated Lustron homes around a central atrium and even included an indoor swimming pool. In fact, this particular home is believed to be the last Lustron ever constructed. In January 2013, the developers and new owners of 4111 Tonawanda approached the DM Plan and Zoning Commission for approval to subdivide the property. The minutes of that January 3rd meeting repeatedly referenced the existing single-family dwelling. But just over a month later, a rep from the demo company walked into the Permanent Development Center on the morning of February 14th and was on the property within a matter of minutes to begin demolition. By the time some of us, as members of the Des Moines Historical Society, had a chance to arrive and take pictures, it was half gone already, and that was at 11:30 a.m. The sight of this unique home being torn apart in pieces sickened some of us and saddened most of us, particularly when it could have been so easily deconstructed, moved, or repurposed and kept out of the landfill. How did this happen? A home of what would likely be determined to be historical significance taken down in a matter of hours and no red flags were raised? The mission of the Des Moines Historical Society is to promote the preservation and study of history and heritage of Des Moines. Just since January 1st, we've held tours of endangered buildings, the First Church of Christ Scientist at 3750 Grand Avenue, slated for demolition in 2014, and the 1880s row house at 709 East Locust, slated for demolition yet this spring. Thankfully, the owners of these properties have allowed us access in order to document their histories in photographs and video. Both the church and the row house are good candidates for the National Register of Historic Places, though neither of them is currently listed. The row house, interestingly, was designated a local landmark in Des Moines in 2000. Another example is the Stockdale Double House at 4018 Ingersoll, which we know has ties to the Mayor County's family. That was also determined to be eligible for the National Register, but is currently sitting empty and deteriorating rapidly. As Nan mentioned earlier, we're curious to know where the Historic Preservation Commission sits on issues such as these. It remains quiet on issues that are going on outside of Sherman Hill, Riverbend, or Owl's Head, when the purpose clearly states that it's to further the preservation efforts in the entire city of Des Moines. We understand the sensitive nature of property owners and developers who have different plans in mind for whatever old buildings might be in their way. We do not wish to stop them from doing what they have to or what they want to. That is their right. We only ask that the city consider an ordinance that would allow for a demolition review for homes and buildings that are older than 50 years old. The city of Cedar Rapids has such an ordinance, which I have a copy of, and which requires a moratorium of 10 business days to allow for the chance to review the request for demolition only for those homes and buildings that are 50 years old or older. Something like that in the city of Des Moines would go a long way toward capturing important parts of our collective history before they are lost forever. In the Community Preservation Plan, written in 1995, under the section titled Zoning, is a section of future milestones, the first of which states, develop a conservation zoning classification for the city zoning ordinance that would require review for new construction, demolition, major additions to buildings and structures, and surface parking lots in specifically designated traditional neighborhoods, not to be confused with designated local historic districts. We know that progress requires change, and we get that. We only ask that you thoughtfully consider what is at stake before permanent changes are made. Let us work with you on this. Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. Christine?
Are there going to be more speakers, Sarah? Or?
I don't know.
Okay. Are there other folks that want to speak to this? And we would ask, if so, I'd like to see a show of hands so we have an idea of how many are going to speak to it. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Jesse, you going to speak?
Okay.
Maybe 5? Okay.
Do you have any questions?
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Come forward.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor and members of the council, I'm Jeff Krausman, Dickinson Law Firm, 699 Walnut Street in Des Moines. I represent ST Investments. ST Investments is a developer that you should be familiar with. It has managed to restore or rehab a number of older buildings in the city. They're responsible for the Tone Lofts down by Brown Camp, and they are also responsible for the East Village Court project, which took an old abandoned warehouse that was shuttered and rehabilitated it into 4 commercial properties and additional housing units. These are the individuals who purchased 4111 Tonawanda Drive. And I wanted to impress upon you the fact that these are not people who are bulldozer crazy. They have shown a willingness and a desire to keep historic property or to keep old property, rehabilitate it where possible. They were the owners of the railroad station on East Court Avenue and were in the process of rehabilitating it when the Bar Association approached them and decided to purchase that property from them and use it as the State Bar Association headquarters. These are not folks that knock things down willy-nilly. The ST Investments Group bought the property at 4111 after it had sat on the market for over 6 months with no takers. In January, they attended a P&Z meeting, at which time they informed P&Z that they were looking to separate the 2.5 acres into 2 building lots. The purpose of the meeting, which I did not attend, but I am instructed that the purpose of the meeting was to approve the use of a larger water line that would need to service that property from 42nd Street. The side effect, by the way, of their project in dividing this property will be that a new, if they do in fact develop it as 2 lots, which is their intent, there will be a new fire hydrant installed on the east edge of their property, which will also help protect the existing Salisbury House property as well, which you may not realize has a long way to go between fire hydrants, and this is a plus for that area. The property that we're talking about was initially intended to be kept. Developers realized that the pool house at the south end of the property was going to have to go, and announced that early on in their acquisition of the property. And that was the status of their plans at the time of the Plan and Zoning meeting in mid-January. The property was further examined, and as was indicated, these Lustron homes have no supplier for parts. The company that built these homes, or built the components that went into these homes, went out of business in about 1950, and you have to scavenge to find parts to fix them. So the developers looked at this property, which they intended initially to retain and build a separate house on the other half of the property. But as they calculated the cost of obtaining these parts, it became obvious that the property would not be salvageable. That decision was reached several weeks before the house was demolished. During the 3 months that the property was owned by S&T Investments prior to this, they received no phone calls from the Salisbury House Foundation inquiring about their plans for the house. I think in reading some of the material that the Salisbury House Foundation Executive Director has put on his blog, it was clear that they were assuming that the property would be kept as it was. There wasn't any effort to communicate with the developer as to how those plans were changing, or if they were changing. There was no request to the developer that they come in and take pictures or document the property in any way. It appears to me that there was a failure to communicate, a failure to let each other know perhaps what was going on. But this was, at that point that the S&T Investments acquired this property was a house that hadn't been owned in the Weeks family for almost 25 years. It had been owned by the Mulehops and was simply offered for sale without any restriction or any intention or any requirement that it be preserved in any way. I've heard the recommendation or the request from the Historical Society that there be information exchanged or information provided at the time of a demolition permit. Frankly, that does not in any way discourage us, or we don't object to that kind of a communication effort. But we also have to recognize that sometimes these properties do reach the end of their useful life. And according to the material published by the Salisbury House Foundation, they did not have the wherewithal to maintain this property, and the property itself was not in the kind of excellent condition that some people have claimed that it was. It needed substantial repairs, repairs with parts that simply can't be bought.
Jeff, we'd ask that you kind of wind up your comments, if you would, please.
You bet. Our final comment is that we did not do anything with this property in terms of promising anything. We told people that part of it was going to have to be demolished, and then people never did contact us about anything further. And it's clear that making assumptions on the part of everybody probably didn't lead to a good outcome in terms of communication. But other than that, I think the intent here is to provide 2 new properties in Des Moines that will be a great addition to the residential area. Thank you.
Thank you. We'd like to have everybody that intends to speak, please kind of come over on the south side of the room here. That would be great. Yes, sir. You're up.
I'm J. Eric Smith. I'm the Executive Director of the Salisbury House Foundation. I was hired at the House last April, and it was within about a week of Chuck Mulehops passing. And so literally from the time that I started my job there, this was something that was on our radar screen. My first 30-day report that I gave to our board said we have to do a feasibility study to see how to reacquire this property. It's part of the Salisbury House history. It was built by Hud Weeks. He was the only one of Carl and Edith Weeks' sons that made his life in Des Moines, that stayed here, and he raised his children here. So it was an important piece of our history. The budget and the financial situation that I inherited at Salisbury House was dire. We have $3.1 million worth of debt on about an $800,000 operating budget and less than $2 million in investments. And so as the CEO of this corporation, when we did the feasibility study, I could not in good conscience go to my board and say we need to take on another $500,000 in debt to acquire and make this property suitable to our needs. Our plan was then to go into a capital campaign mode. And we did go visit the house, myself and one board member and one of my staff members. We visited the house. We spoke with the realtor. We asked that we be kept informed. We asked that the communication be given to us if there had been activity and progress on the sale of the house. And we received no such communication. We actually had a potentially interested donor who had made a very significant offer to help us with this house, basically covering half the costs if our board could cover the other half. This donor contacted the realtor. This would be in November, and that was the first we learned that there was an offer on the house. This donor actually made an offer on our behalf, and the Howard company actually removed their contingency and used the right of first refusal, so we were unable to acquire it. So we recognized that we did the best that we could, and we could not acquire it, and it was not meant to be at this point. But we took comfort in what we saw when we actually did see the documents that were submitted to P&Z, that the house would be preserved, that the lots would be subdivided, that the lower lot, the new lot that's being put in, would actually be given the utilities that it needed, and that the pool house would be taken down. So we held out hope that at some point in the future, once all this work was done, we could continue to fundraise and we may be able to acquire it. So the thing that was very difficult for us was actually, and we didn't. I mean, you're exactly right, the attorney. We did not reach out because we saw no cause for alarm with anything that had been presented either to the city or in communication, verbal communication with our board president, who's actually involved or is on the P&Z. So it really was. I mean, I value property rights. I understand. I respect their right to do, they acquired the property fairly on the open market. I respect their rights to manage the property the way they see fit. We were very surprised at the rapidity of which this changed. And I will remark, it was January 3rd was when it went before P&Z, and the house came down on February 14th. So it's not like we spent 6 months not talking. We were monitoring the process that was going over there, and then we came to work one day as the backhoe began knocking the property down. And by the morning of February 15th, it was down. So I do think that there was, I think on both sides, there was a lack of communication. I accept that. We maybe should have been more aggressive in going back to the realtor and saying, hey, what's up? We may have been more aggressive in going back. But nonetheless, as you note, these Lustron homes are priceless. People scavenge them. And it was really heartbreaking to watch the backhoe take these panels and a lot of the equipment and a lot of the material in this house. It would have been very valuable to other Lustron owners, a couple of dozen of which are in Des Moines, and there's about 150 of them in the state of Iowa. And watching that all get hauled away to the dump was heartbreaking. It really was an important part of our history, and it's gone. So I appreciate the opportunity to just give you the Salisbury House perspective on that one, and we're looking forward to being good neighbors as best we can be. And hope we get that same respect.
Eric, thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Ann Stillions again, 1604 24th Street Place. After my previous statement, what I would like to say, and particularly to the attorney who just spoke, there, as Vonnegut said, there are no villains, but there are conditions that lead to villainy. This is not one, and the house is gone. But what I would urge the council to do is, instead of trusting just the in-house people, that you reach out to Iowa State and to all of those people in the city who are interested in the character that the city can still retain and make and celebrate, because there are things all throughout this city. They're not the beautiful vistas because they've been clogged, but there are a number of things left. And I don't know, Drake doesn't have much going on architecture. But Iowa State, instead of just turning out so many architects who need jobs, they used to have a great educational program that went back into history on the built environment. And they sent people out to do all kinds of educational work. We were privileged to hire some of them at the Arts Council. We've got all these architects. And some of these people are very well educated in the history of great architecture and interesting architecture and unique neighborhoods. And if we could get the city working with other groups instead of just relying on its own in-house commissions and boards, and have a brainstorming session. There are ways to solve the problems that some of us come complaining and, tearing our hair about. There are ways to look into the future and see what we can save now, what's left. And for Salisbury House and for Drake and for the other educational sources in the city, to get together and talk to one another instead of always being in our little separate pods. And somebody in the city's got to initiate that.
Thomas Matthews, 3808 Kingman Boulevard, Des Moines. First of all, property rights. I support property rights. I own a house. But keep in mind that property rights are not absolute. What if I owned the Mona Lisa? I might have the legal right to throw that painting in a fireplace. But a moral right? No way. We've got to consider what our moral obligations are in preserving those priceless, irreplaceable buildings that we still have. I think about the Christian Science Church. Yeah, we all saw the for sale sign there, but we had no clue that it might be sold to somebody who intended to demolish it. If I had known that, maybe I would have organized a fundraising effort to try to buy it and make it a public resource, a public building. Not a church maybe, but a place where people could gather and be inspired by architecture. They say man does not live by bread alone. Well, let's make that gender neutral. People don't live by bread alone. Money is extremely important, but if we let money be our one determining factor in what we save and what we allow to be destroyed, we have no claim to morality. We have no claim then to be a cultural center as we aspire to be. I support Sarah Oltrage's proposals. We do need an early warning system to try to allow people a chance to save buildings that must be saved. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Pat Miners, 4115 55th. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for allowing me this opportunity. There's been some talk today about miscommunications and maybe, Salisbury House didn't communicate with S.T. Howard, et cetera. S.T. Howard is the one on January 3rd who made a presentation before the Planning and Zoning Commission that said that the home would stay where it was. So what happened to their responsibility to tell others about their change? When can we learn to trust what's submitted before councils and boards in the city? That we should have been able to trust. And there was no trust there. And I'm not sure anyone should ever trust S.T. Howard again, because we found out they don't stick to what they say they're going to do. So first of all, that was their problem. That was their miscommunication. That was their lack. That had nothing to do with the Salisbury House. That home was for sale for $535,000. It sold for $475,000. I wish I had that kind of money to buy a home. I would consider it quite a castle, and to say that it needed a lot of repairs, I think might be quite disingenuous. Lestron homes were built in pieces. They were put together in pieces. They move easily in pieces. The only part of that probably wouldn't have moved easily, well, of course, you can't move a pool, but you could move the structure around it, and you could rebuild the atrium that connected them. There was no problem in moving that. There were people who wanted to move that. There were people who would love to have moved that. If I was Salisbury House, I would not consider S.T. Howard good neighbors. I would consider them very poor neighbors. I like to be able to trust my neighbors. So they have the responsibility to make the change. Right now we have other buildings in town that may soon come down that should not. Among them, the East Woodlawn School, where Roto-Rooter was invented. And in case you're not familiar with that, it looks like a little old house with really ugly burnt orange trim right outside the east entrance to Veterans Auditorium. And it's been on the endangered properties list. And in fact, I was working today to get some information to the Register about writing an article about that. Of course, the YMCA, which is by the AIA, is considered one of the 50 most important buildings of the 20th century in the state of Iowa. And again, I was talking today with the Bricklayers Union, and I hope we can get at least the murals saved from that building. There's also the Row House, the Stockdale House, the Church of Christ Scientists, which there is a movement to try to turn that into a museum, and I hope that works. And since I'm here and I've got your ear, I want to talk a little bit about NEAR. And we all know, and this is a little bit different subject, but still Historic Preservation Commission. You can't turn hog's ear into a silk purse, right? But maybe if you're lucky, you can turn it into a little suede coin purse. And when you were talking about those windows in the home down on 9th Street, which, by the way, was John Ron's home, and there was talk one time of turning that into a Des Moines museum. And after the fire, someone did come in and rehab it, and then it was sold to the current owners. But what I'm saying is, when you make judgments about the windows and other things, you need to consider where that house is located. You need to consider the incomes of the people in that neighborhood. You need to consider what that home is worth. Putting $13,000 worth of windows into a home on Sherman Hill might be the appropriate thing to do. Putting $13,000 into a $100,000 home, I'd sure have to think a lot about that. So instead, you've got people who may not change the windows. Is that going to help anyone to make a home that they can't change the windows because they can't afford it? So instead, they have leaky windows. They don't conserve energy. That's benefiting no one. So I would suggest that someone else on the council who voted yes on that approach Councilman Coleman, who voted no, and say, we'd really like to reconsider that. Would you please bring up a motion to reconsider that until we can look into that and maybe change our rules and say that some of these things should possibly look at the neighborhood, the income of the neighborhood, the value of the properties before we make such what I consider a rash decision? I think that's all I've got to say right now. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Jesse Lewis, 3120 Valdez Drive. I'm here tonight to speak because Frank prompted me to speak. And the reason is that is primarily emotional. Frank and I go a long ways back with Barb Weeks, who grew up in that house. And I've been talking to Barb over the course of the last couple of days back and forth, and I just want you to know that she and her brother Cooper and her friends from California to New York are all pretty sad about this particular situation. And I agree that this is a situation that happened as a result of the lack of communication. It also happened as a result of probably some level of insensitivity. And I think that insensitivity could probably start to be addressed by some of the recommendations that you've gotten from the Des Moines Historical Society tonight. I really do think that there are many cultural and historical resources in this community that not too many people are aware of, particularly as those of us who grew up in this community and are graying in age. you're losing a valuable resource in and of itself. And if there isn't a sensitivity to these resources at a neighborhood level, at a city staff level, if there isn't some kind of criteria that the city has for looking at these resources and evaluating their value, then I think resources like this gets lost. And I think probably the biggest loss here in this particular house is that there are a great number of lustrons around the country, and there are homeowners who are always looking to salvage parts to keep their homes in repair and in good shape. And we lost a stockpile of materials here that could feed those resources around the country, and that's really a shame. And it shouldn't have happened, and it could have been avoided. But it's water over the dam and under the bridge at this point. So, you know, on behalf of Barb and those of us who grew up with Barb and partied in that house and swam in that pool, I just want you to know that that we're all pretty sad about it, and we hope that you'll have some way to get to your emotion on this subject and try to prevent it from happening again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jesse.
Hi there. David Barzin, 420 51st Street in Des Moines. And Mayor and council members, I don't really have a lot to say other than I've worked really hard at restoring a lot of older homes around Des Moines, mainly properties built between 1890 and 1920. And we started out this conversation today talking about windows and historic windows and how we had to put the weights back in. And I've gone through and I've done that on a lot of properties around Des Moines, and I'm all for that. And I've researched pulleys and weights and all that, trying to figure it out. But I don't know if this is the venue that we need to have going forward to try to put together a moratorium or a waiting period on demolition permits. But I agree with Sarah. I think that, you know, if there's a property that's being torn down that's more than 50 years old, that has some historic significance or not, that there should be some kind of a waiting period to determine, you know, is there some other thing that should be done. This Lutron house, you know, there's a number of them around Des Moines. If you drive up and down Polk Boulevard, you'll see a few of them there too. And I agree. I think it was ridiculous the way it was rushed through to be demolished, when those parts could have been reused, the house could have been moved. But he knew he would get a fight if it came out publicly that it was going to be torn down. And so he just got the permit, tore it down within hours of getting it. Really don't have a lot more to say other than that, but I just, you know, is this the group that could put together a waiting period on demolition permit, or is that something that's done at planning and zoning?
We'll talk about it.
So is that something that could get passed?
Well, it would not here tonight, but we'll talk about a motion that could be made that could get it started.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
David, thank you.
Thank you, David.
Ann Schmidt, Des Moines resident, 4406 Beaver Crest Drive. I would just like to reiterate many of the comments and urge the council to work with their staff and the HPC, Historic Preservation Commission, to work on a demolition delay. It works in several cities. A 10 or 30-day delay gives the opportunity to have communication, to have discussions. In this case, the argument that they were not able to repair the home because the parts were unavailable seems so ironic when they disposed of all the parts. And if the demolition were an inevitable situation, perhaps that delay period could have resulted in a conversation about salvage material or reusing elements or simply documentation. I know there are more people here who are in support of the concept of a demolition delay who haven't spoken. If we can just take a moment and have everyone who is in favor of the council considering this type of action moving forward, please stand. I think that would show you how many people are really invested in this and would like to see, we know this resource has been lost, but if we can do something, if this can be a tipping point to consider our historic resources and put something into the process that doesn't prevent or delay development and progress, but allows people the opportunity to communicate and discuss options, that would be best. Thank you.
Did you want to ask a question, Brian?
I did have a question, and maybe Sarah can answer this. The last speaker mentioned other cities that have these ordinances. Can we get access to those other ordinances?
The one that I found, I have the ordinance from Cedar Rapids.
Okay.
And that's the one that I would encourage you to pattern after.
Okay.
It's available online.
Yeah.
The city of Chicago also has a demolition delay ordinance.
Chicago does as well. Okay, thank you. Christine?
I want to thank everybody for coming down here tonight, and Sarah, for you taking the lead on this. I know we exchanged a few emails early on when this was all developing, and I support and am sympathetic to every single comment that was made here tonight. I think it was a tragedy that occurred here that didn't need to occur. I talked with the attorney earlier, and you know, there are some issues with property rights, but I really believe that we need to step back and look at, okay, what can we learn from this unfortunate incident that occurred? You coming forward with the demolition delay, I know I was talking with somebody before the meeting, and I said there's got to be a way for us to have a delay so that when these permits are taken out. And I do have a feeling that it was done quickly so that they wouldn't have to have the public getting involved, and now it's just happening after the fact rather than before the fact, when we know from a city perspective that we've had some great individuals come forward and move some properties. You know, Mercy Hospital, when they were talking about doing demolition of those big houses on 6th Avenue, those are some beautiful homes now over in the Sherman Hill area. You've got the Murillo apartments. When we moved those, it was quite a challenge, but those are now functioning very well. So I find it hard to believe that we could have not figured out a way to make this happen. So I'm very supportive. I would love to see us work with staff on what the options are. I don't know, you know, we'll have to look at all of it, work with P&Z, work with the community development staff, and figure out how we can prevent this from happening on future projects. It doesn't mean that we're going to take away the rights of the property owner to do with what they want, but we need to make sure that there is a process that's outlined so that when there is going to be a demolition, we know what the logical steps of that process will be so that different individuals can get involved. And you know, it's a real missed opportunity, and I'm sorry it happened, but, you know, we can point fingers at a lot of us, you know, even up here at the council table. I remember when it came to the council table and we discussed, you know, it was actually a separation to allow another development. You know, had we been on our toes, had I been on my toes, I should have raised the question, and what does that mean for the existing property? But there was, by no reference, it was silent on the issue of demolition. Therefore, assumptions were made, and they were not correct assumptions. And so that's where we're at today. So we learn from what's transpired, move forward, and I believe that we'll get something accomplished. So my motion will be to refer it back to the city manager, work with all the appropriate staff, and make sure that we include Sarah and her group, you know, in some of the discussions as appropriate to get feedback from them.
Could we go one step further? You know, Christine, when I spent a number of years on planning and zoning, we were presented with a lot of buildings in downtown that we thought needed to be saved, and a couple of them did. And I think that part of the statements have been made concerning the fabric in the past and how it reflects on the future of city, and it gives kind of that fabric of what's happened and you know, from whence we came and where we are and where we're going. And when you wipe all that away, it seems to change an awful lot of people's opinions. And you talk to young people, and I look at some of the buildings in downtown that have been repurposed, converted, looked at in sort of a new way, and have saved some of those buildings, I think is a fabulous idea, as opposed to knocking them all to the ground. And I guess for new opportunity. So I would, and by the way, I also understand from a staff standpoint, and as we talked about some of these things years ago and as recently as today about, you know, the burden that's kind of out there. I think years ago when Larry and I talked about some of these things on P&Z, you look at the housing stock in the city of Des Moines, as a for instance. I think at the time that we were talking about, there's like 61 or 2,000 single-family residences in the city of Des Moines, the majority of which were built, over half of them, pre-1955. So, we'd have to look at, what we do with all those, because every one of those fits the category that we're talking about, that 50-year kind of threshold that Sarah talked about. Might be a great idea, but let's, look at what needs to happen here and where we go on this. I would suggest maybe, Christine, one step further, that maybe we include a couple of council members and make it either a mayor's or a council task force to work on it with staff and with these residents, well-intentioned, and with Historic District Commission to talk about, all the things that need to be discussed about the future of preservation in the city of Des Moines and what that means and where we go from here. But I would suggest that we do it pretty soon, because I would imagine there's a number of places that the wrecking ball would like to take away, given the free open market and thought process of a lot of folks that are surrounding this. So if we could
That's fine.
include that.
Yep, I accept that amendment.
Any other comments?
I might comment when I was on
Please.
planning and zoning and the buildings we lost. One of the prizes we kept is the temple though downtown. I know Dan Stillen was involved in that when we were going through planning and zoning. We lost some buildings down there we shouldn't have. We voted to keep them on one hand, and we didn't get enough support, though.
Well, actually, council voted to save them. A number of them got knocked down right after they got okayed, so I don't know. Okay, we have a motion by Christine. And
Create a mayor's task force.
yeah, and let's turn it over to the manager's office to figure out how we're going to function in that regard, and then how many folks we bring in. When we did task force earlier on regarding energy and the environment and all those kinds of things, pretty soon we had about 75 people showing up pretty regularly to the meetings, and I'm not sure that that's the easiest body to try to look at it, but I know there's lots of people in Des Moines that have deep interest in these kind of subjects, so I think early on it wouldn't trouble me to sit in on those kinds of meetings. So we might figure out some way for people to sign up to do it, and then any council members that would want to participate.
I would, since I've got 2 historic districts.
Got 2.
Hallie's got 1.
You've got 1.
You don't have a library either.
Yeah, you ought to have a historic district down there.
So Christine, Mayor, was there one more down this way?
Well,
Hallie? So those 3. If I could just follow up, if Phil, if you could get a hold of Sarah and maybe the others in the room, at least get names and addresses so we can follow up with them.
These villages.
All right, we have a motion.
7 yes.
All right, that takes us to item 45. Takes us to item 45, approving the rental of emergency snow and ice control equipment from various suppliers for good cause, shown at a cost of $184,300. Council Communication number 13-102. This is probably after the fact, is it not?
It is, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Anybody like to speak to this item? Emergency snow and ice control equipment. Seeing none, could we have a motion?
Move.
Could we have a short explanation on this so that the folks I got the calls from today understand that this is retroactive back to the blizzard of December? The way it reads is, if you read it, it sounds like it's for 1 week, $180,000, and it's not just for the 1 week.
Mr. Moore, council members, I think you did explain it pretty well. I'll try real quickly, Pat. Essentially what happened is, after the major blizzard that occurred in December of last year, we realized there was a need for some additional backup equipment. Pat Kazitz and his staff went out and leased this equipment at that point in time. We're coming back to you now. I apologize, it's a little bit after the fact, but we did it in an emergency framework, and we're bringing it to you tonight for approval. But Mr. Moore, you are correct. It's really back to that point in time.
Okay.
Seven yes.
All right, that brings to an end the Des Moines City Council meeting. Could I have a motion to adjourn and reconvene as Board of Health? Hallie, I think, did it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Item 1 is authorizing the legal department to proceed with court action seeking the authority to abate the public nuisances at the following locations. A is 210 East Rose Avenue. It's a garage structure. And B is 219 30th Street. It's a main structure held in a state. Is there anybody here to speak on either one of these items? Board of Health.
Move.
It's been moved. Any discussion?
See you, Brian.
Bob?
Watch our backs up there.
7 yes.
I'm going to go up in the morning.
All right, 7-0 on both of those. Could we have a motion to adjourn?
You know about that?
All in favor, say aye.
Bye. It's a chamber thing.
Opposed?
It's a chamber thing. It's not a city deal.
We said adjourn.
Southeast, west chambers, downtown maybe, I don't know.